The CIA developed a giant arsenal, what appears to be the largest arsenal of Trojans and viruses in the world, that attacks most of the systems that journalists, people in government, politicians, CEOs, and average people use. Didn't secure it, lost control of it, and then appears to have covered up that fact. We see some press reportage, and we've detected some things as well, that the Central Intelligence Agency became aware within the last couple of months that it had lost that material, or that we had that material, and has not disclosed that to the public, at least, has not warned the public that those loose cyber weapons arsenal is out there. WikiLeaks has a lot more information on what has been going on with the cyber weapons program. And so I want to announce today that after considering what we think is the best way to proceed, and hearing these calls from some of the manufacturers, we have decided to work with them to give them some exclusive access to the additional technical details we have, so that fixes can be developed and pushed out so people can be secured. And then once this material is effectively disarmed by us, by removing critical components, we will publish additional details about what has been occurring.
So welcome to our 13th Candidates for Assange. I'm very happy today. We've got several new candidates, and we've got Phil, our trusty old Phil. And so I thought it would be just good to start at the top with hearing from Assange. It's been a long time. You know, he's not even present in the courtroom. No one's seen him. He's been too ill to even be present. And I also wanted to play that because I think last time we played a clip of Chris Hedges talking about exactly what a threat he was, not just in revealing war crimes and, collateral murder, but also Vault 7 and all of those tools that the CIA can use against all of us. So, okay, so we're going to start off today with Daniel DeCeter, who is a really long-time friend of mine and activist here in North Carolina. And we've been doing this every show meeting just to show that there is power in numbers, and there's power in having grassroots action to work with candidates, because we know that most of you guys aren't, backed by super PAC money. And so it's great to have people on the ground helping you. And so Daniel, with that, do you want to jump in and tell a little bit about, I believe I've still got your picture of the billboard that you helped organize. You could maybe start with that.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And thanks to, I'm the odd man out, not a candidate, but thanks to all the candidates that are willing to speak about Julian. And because, this is really the most important issue. If without free speech, whatever issue is your number one, you can't really fight for it. So, but yeah, so I've always been a supporter of WikiLeaks and thinking that, or believe that Julian is a hero. And I really got active, I guess, after April 11th, 2019, seeing him getting pulled out of the embassy, just was so infuriating. I'm surprised that more people weren't infuriated by it. It was just like the scene out of 1984. And so, yeah, I just felt like I had to do something. I started looking for groups to plug into. There really wasn't much happening actively on the ground. So I really just started putting up flyers around town and, searching for groups online. Basically, I got in touch with Action for Assange, who were doing the Free Assange live streams at the time. And they were super helpful, and just plugged in with them, started doing a ton of DC actions. We were there for all the hearings and anniversaries, and that has grown into a group, DC Action for Assange, which thanks to Paula Isabel, who started that. So they're doing actions in DC all the time, which I've joined in. Paula also started the Merrick Garland vigils, which I think are extremely important, happening twice a month, I believe, still right outside of his house. But yeah, so I've tried to get involved in every way I could. I did a GoFundMe where we got up 9 billboards around North Carolina for Julian. And yeah, now we have this, we have more time to fight. I mean, it's hard to be, I'm glad that the appeal was granted, but still, it's kind of hard to be happy about it, or to talk as though this is some legitimate process that's happening here. If it was, Julian would have been free to begin with. So, but yeah, I mean, we have to keep up the energy, keep fighting until he's free.
Yeah, so I'm having trouble finding your billboard picture, but we can talk about, I mean, you were at the Roger Waters concert, I know, with the table, and I mean, you've been at this for years, and I know sometimes it's frustrating trying to keep at it and keep talking to people. But Matt, this is a good time. Maybe you could do what you usually do with asking. We'll go around and let all the candidates introduce themselves and like why you're a candidate for Assange, and how do you talk to people in your communities? How do you bring up this topic, because it's still so blacked out. So I'll toss it to you, Matt. Oh, you're muted.
Phil, you've seen me do that, like 4 or 5 times now, at least.
Yeah.
But no, I think with the, I was there in London a week and a half ago when the appeal was granted. And one thing that was said after another by those on the Assange team, whether it's his legal people, whether it was his family, whether people who've been supporting him for more than a decade, was that this is a political case. It's not a legal case. And the only reason the British justices did what they did was because of the political pressure that was put on them, that they could not just go along with the Americans because people were watching, people were paying attention, and people were applying pressure, whether it was the several hundred people we had outside the courthouse that day, or, literally hundreds of thousands, millions of people around the world who have applied some form of pressure. So I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves and, following on what Kelly said, why is this an issue for you, and how do you see these types of issues being a part of the currency of your campaign to put pressure onto the system? Because you guys are libertarians and Greens, you're outside of the system essentially. How does this work for you? I guess basically. But Olivia, you're at the top left, so I'll ask you to go first, please.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me tonight, guys. So yeah, my name's Olivia Hayes. I'm running for Senate in Kansas for Senate District 30. And I was thinking back earlier today, like how I first heard of Julian, and I started as a journalism major. So I always knew WikiLeaks, like it was just always part of my brain, I think, as a third party source. And so recently, being more involved with the Libertarian Party and hearing Edward Snowden spoke at our convention 2 years ago via stream. And I recently got to meet Gabriel a couple of times at different film screenings and stuff. And for me, it really came alive when it was hearing about the family's plight and hearing how long this is going on. And, one way that I advocate for Julian on the campaign trail, and even really before I jumped in as a candidate, I was hosting my own screenings and postcard drives and all that stuff here. I live just outside Wichita. So it's, if somebody knows about WikiLeaks and Assange and even Snowden, whether it's very unlikely that they know the truth of it, right? So hosting these events where I can just have these conversations with people. And one of the main ways I talk about it is I ask, do you trust the media? Do you trust mainstream media now? And everybody, regardless of what party they're a part of, will kind of chuckle and say, well, no, not really. I get news that I trust from alternate sources, and I tell them, if you think it's bad now, see what happens if they make an example out of Julian. It's going to get worse, So that's one way. I just one of the ways I try to appeal to folks when I'm really trying to advocate for this issue. I think that if we want whistles to continue being blown, we have to look at how we are treating whistleblowers, and we have to change it. And we have to. One thing that Gabriel said when I met him for the first time in Kansas City was they're not just trying to make an example of him; they're trying to make a blueprint out of him. And this is too big of a case to let it go by without fighting as much as we can at every level of government.
Fantastic, absolutely. And we'll alternate libertarian to green. So Robin, how about yourself? And where in New Jersey are you running?
I am running for Congress in District 1 of New Jersey. So I am running against Donald Norcross, who is the brother of one of the most powerful power brokers in the state, who the guy who basically runs the Democratic Party in New Jersey. And Norcross was essentially installed into office 10 years ago. Long story about that. But anyway, and the reason I agreed to run for Congress against him was because there isn't an arms deal that Norcross doesn't love. He is funded heavily by AIPAC, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and a host of other military contractors, and his voting record reflects that. He is very proud of voting to send billions and billions of dollars and weapons to Israel. And he's also very proud of voting in favor of the TikTok bill and in favor of the bill to make any kind of opposition term it as anti-Semitism. Anyone who says free Palestine or from the river to the sea or ceasefire now or whatever, we're all anti-Semites according to the law that Donald Norcross wants to has supported. So and those two particular things, are attacks on our First Amendment rights, which goes hand in hand with what they've done to Julian Assange. And I used to teach courses at Rutgers University about the control of the media by the corporations and the banks and the military-industrial complex. And this just, I could see this happening, what's happening now, 20, 30 years ago, because they were taking the steps to silence any kind of dissent, to sanitize the news. It was very marked when they did it with Operation Desert Storm. Remember that? And what they did was they stopped reporting war the way they did during Vietnam. And war became reported in front of maps with little dots on them, rather than showing the actual consequences and travesties caused by war. And so it became important to look for alternate sources. And, you know, when WikiLeaks released the video, I forget the name of it, on
The collateral murder.
Collateral murder. Yes, thank you. You know, that was the first that a lot of people had seen of actual war.
Right, right.
And it shocked a lot of people. Those of us who grew up during the Vietnam War, you know, had seen equally horrible things happening. But we knew that the efforts to silence that video and to silence Assange would lead to worse things for everybody in the long run. It would lead to more or more propaganda, carefully crafted propaganda in the news, in, you know, the corporate media, of course, so that what we get is Noam Chomsky called it manufactured consent. You know, that they tell us what just enough to get a certain kind of response from the public, and but it's not an informed response. And so we've basically now gotten to the point where we can see the consequences of the political silencing of Julian Assange and other whistleblowers too.
Right, right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And moving on to Phil Anderson.
Hi. Thanks, Matt. And thanks, Kelly, for having me on again. My name is Phil Anderson. I'm running for United States Senate in Wisconsin, and I'm a libertarian. Been a libertarian a long time. My opponent, I have one opponent very similar to Robbins, and that is Tammy Baldwin. She's a Democrat, and there's not a military spending bill that she doesn't like. And although she comes off as warm and fuzzy and caring, she still sends as much money to the Pentagon as they ask for without even questioning or wondering why they keep failing audits, et cetera. My other opponent is a Republican named Eric Hovde, who doesn't even really live here and is kind of so we don't need to talk much about him. That's not a biased opinion. That's pretty accurate, I'd say. The reason that this issue is so important to me, it's sort of part and parcel of being a libertarian, I think, and maybe Olivia will agree with me in that if you already are predisposed to being suspicious about government power, government abuse, then what WikiLeaks and Julian Assange have fought to release is proof of that. It's just a demonstration of that. And so when I first became involved in politics, probably 15 years ago, the revelations through WikiLeaks just confirmed things that I'd already thought and believed, and made it that much easier, or for me to talk about those things to people. And my questions as a candidate to people are not trying to tell them about Julian Assange right out of the gate, but asking them questions like, are you aware that the government is doing this or that? Or why doesn't the government want you to know about the Julian Assange case? Why does the press barely mention it? Why are they hiding the truth from you? What could they possibly be doing that they would want to hide from you? And usually those questions are, they cut across political boundaries, and they're usually pretty compelling. I think it's a good way to campaign, or any sort of persuasion is to ask questions. And so that's what I do. And usually if somebody's receptive, and a lot of people are, until you get to the point where it becomes partisan, and this is not really a partisan issue at all, except for how the two parties approach it. You eventually end up at the spot where, Olivia mentioned at the end of her comments that they're not only trying to make an example of him, but a template. And I would argue that I agree, of course, and that really they prefer that he die in prison. Mm-hmm. And I was relieved on May 20th when he was granted the right to appeal. That's good that he's not coming here. But as we've talked about before, it would be really bad press for him to be extradited here and then have the American people possibly wake up to the issue a little bit more than they already have. Right now, Julian's in Britain and he's an Australian, and the concept of free speech is not as tangible under those circumstances. But if he were extradited here and our Department of Justice had to answer questions about that, and people were more awakened to the idea of what's going on, they'd ask a lot harder questions. But I think it's all being orchestrated, as hopeful as what happened on May 20th may have seemed, that was probably part of the plan too. And so it's good that he's still alive and that we're still all fighting for him, and appreciate the activism that Daniel and other people do. Still, I'm extremely cynical about the motives of my government. I even hate calling it my government. It's not something I voted for or consent to. And just feel like they know, they're very smart. They know everything by virtue of the intelligence apparatus, gathering information. They know exactly what kind of health Julian's in. There's no telling what's going on in Belmarsh in terms of how he's being influenced, other than just being imprisoned. They control what he eats and what he breathes, et cetera. So I think that it's the most likely scenario is, and I hate to say this, but that he dies in that prison at a politically convenient time for the empire here in the United States.
Right. I think that's a fear a lot of people share. Misty Winston, who is a host, a radio show host, as well as an activist. Daniel and Kelly have worked with her. Maybe you guys might know her as well. She says this so well when she says the whole purpose is to put Julian's head on a pike, serve as a warning. And so, this is all things we can explore. But I want to get to Ben. You all in New Jersey, the Greens in New Jersey, you have candidates in all 13 districts, right?
That's correct.
Hey, great. But Ben, please.
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Ben Taylor. I'm running in Congressional District 9 of New Jersey. If I could kind of bounce off of what Robin was talking about, my opponent has been in Congress. He's a Democrat for 27 years. So this is a very long time to be a representative, and I'm only 25 years old, so it kind of puts into perspective. He's been there longer than I've been around. And I remember back when I was first sort of getting politically engaged and sort of awakened, WikiLeaks and the Assange case, they were very central to what I understood about this government. As Phil said, we don't necessarily always like to call it our government, but and to me, and sort of my message as Greens, as eco-socialists, to me, the Assange case demonstrates, I think, a very limited idea of liberalism and the limitations of liberal capitalism, and especially for the Green Party platform as a whole, and for me in my district, I think that it forces us to kind of ask the real questions, like, what are the industries that are so profitable that we're not allowed to expose them, that we cannot criticize these things? We saw a very brutal police injustice against, for example, the students protesting the genocide in Gaza, and the military in particular has become such a profitable component of Western society that Julian Assange and his team at WikiLeaks became a very big target for the military-industrial complex for profit, and in order to, I believe, now, if you allow me to kind of retreat into theory for just a brief moment, I believe it was Rosa Luxemburg who first theorized that when capitalist markets could not expand further, that the military and war itself would become a market. It has the power to give life and to take away life, and that this becomes a profit system in and of itself, right? So to me, the Assange case was hugely important to my political education. Growing up, as Robin pointed out, these were some of the first images of war that I was seeing, and it did not paint the government with very bright colors, to say the least.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that reminds me of something I wanted to correct Phil on when he said he was cynical. And I said, I don't think that's not the right word to use. I think that the way you express that better, or to be more honest or accurate, is say you've been paying attention and you're skeptical of what the government's saying. So
I suppose I've also run for office 5 times, so I can be a little cynical too.
But anyway, I'll throw it back over to Kelly.
I'm sorry, I found my slide. It's always fun when I'm fumbling and can't find my photos here. But this is Daniel, right? This is the one that you put up here. I'm not sure exactly where in North Carolina this was.
Yeah, this is just outside Raleigh. And yeah, this one was also thanks to you and Randy. You can see the countdown for Assange. We did a number of different Assange visuals. But yeah, this one was actually from Randy. But
yeah, great. And real quick, we mentioned Matt, you mentioned Misty, and I wanted to point out I've got 2 photos here. So we've had Misty drove, I think, almost 2 hours to a candidate that's been on here. I think it was last time, Matt, you weren't here. Michael Harbaugh in Ohio is an independent. And so we coordinated this, and Misty drove all that way and set up a table there and went and talked to people. And that was great. And then let's see, we also had the Denver Assange group went, and this is Valdemar. He's in Denver, I believe. I think it's Colorado's 1st district. So we've been with Halo Benson and Paula that Daniel mentioned, have really been jumping in and helping kind of coordinate with candidates. And I don't know, I think they look pretty happy when people show up to help out. So, but yeah, anyway, I just wanted to show that. And, I think this would be a good time probably, Matt, to show, you were talking about being in London, showing this clip. We're talking about transparency, and it seems so much that we don't have First Amendment rights, and we don't, we are oppressed by the government, but we aren't allowed to, there's no transparency on their side. And I think Stefania Maritzi's, tireless. I think it's 10 years or something like that she's been trying to get these putting in FOIA requests, and they've just been fighting her and giving her like blank pages back. So it's really ironic that, we don't have privacy, but the government has privacy. So anyway, this is that clip, and Matt, this is you're not on camera, but you're talking. So here we go.
What have you been working on recently that have led to what looks like a parliamentary inquiry into misconduct by the Royal Crown Prosecution Service?
Yes, absolutely. I have worked on this investigation for the last 9 years. I am using FOI litigations in UK tribunals, US courts, Swedish courts, Australian courts to get the full documentation. And these documents provide indisputable evidence of interference by the Crown Prosecution Service on the Swedish case, and the result was to keep Julian trapped in London with this label of rapist, and he lost his freedom. He has still to regain. And now we have a cross-party group of members of parliament requesting an inquiry by the Select Justice Committee. Let's hope the Select Justice Committee, which is the Justice Committee of the UK Parliament, opening an investigation to shed light on what really happened. It's not just the Swedish case. The Crown Prosecution Service is the key authority in this extradition case to the US.
Right now, I want to bring in John McDonnell. He is the member of Parliament who has been doing exactly what Stefania was just talking about, looking into this misconduct by the Crown Prosecution Service. thank you for joining us here today. Let me ask you first, what has brought about your interest in Julian Assange's case?
I'm interested in justice overall, but also I'm the secretary of the National Union of Journalists Parliamentary Group. So it's a group of MPs who are the voice of journalists in Parliament, basically. And we've seen this case as, I think, one of the most significant in relation to journalistic practice in this country and globally as well. Because journalists should have the right to report. They should have the right to be able to report, particularly state misdemeanors or state crimes. What Assange did, I think, was a benefit to the whole world, exposing what was going on.
What you're looking into in terms of the misconduct?
Okay. Thanks to the work that Stefania Morizzi has done over years, real intensive investigative journalism, she contacted me, and because she was having difficulty getting freedom of information responses from the Crown Prosecution Service, it's a statutory procedure. They have to respond to those sort of questions. There's a duty of openness and transparency upon them. That clearly wasn't happening. So she asked me to ask some of the questions that I did, and I was getting the same runaround. But as a result of Stefania's research, we identified clear evidence, and there's clear evidence of the Crown Prosecution Service's interference in the case. In other words, trying to influence the Swedish authorities to facilitate Julian's extradition, first to Sweden, but clearly then on to America. It was obvious what was going on. So we've asked, what we have in this country in Parliament is what they call a select committee. It looks at individual departments and state organisations, how they operate. We've asked the select committee, which looks at justice overall, to examine, hold an inquiry into the role of the Crown Prosecution Service. Because in our view, and again, it's MPs from myself, Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, Labour, David Davis, a Conservative, ex-Conservative minister, and Caroline Lucas, a Green, so across party, we've asked them to institute an investigation now. Short, sharp investigation, because we believe that will expose the CPS's, the Crown Prosecution Service, interference in this case.
And so that interference involved deleting emails. Stefania discovered there were emails deleted from the FBI to the Crown Prosecutor Service. So, and they've just redacted everything. So I don't know how many of you know about that or have followed that very closely, but it's just amazing. Again, we're just supposed to accept this lack of transparency.
It's amazing, but it's not surprising. I mean, it's something that we talk about in the United States about, I don't know, Hillary Clinton's emails were probably the biggest example. But just recently, I think last week, it was uncovered that somebody who's works for or with Anthony Fauci at NIH, somebody with a FOIA request found emails where he was being coached as to how to get rid of emails should there be a FOIA request. And so that all came out. I think Reason may have reported that. But that's the culture that we're up against in government, is they actively conspire together to conceal what they're doing, not just like through what we see in the media and the persecution of Assange, but just their request to regular citizens for information that we have every right to have.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, here, if you follow Stefania on Twitter, you can see, and she shared some of these documents here. She said, it took me an entire week to compile a full list of the redactions, which my U.S. FOIA lawyers and I want to challenge. So now we have to fight in court to get redactions removed for 2,191 pages of documents, which I've obtained through litigation. So yeah, she's been at this for years, and they just keep fighting her. So let's see, where's the other one? You see, this is what you get back, just nothing. So I don't know how we accept this. It's not acceptable. Sorry, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone, as Phil said, anyone's surprised about any of this, but your thoughts in terms of, you're running these races as outsiders, so you're all up against the powers that be, right? And you see things like this where this is because the Americans were involved. It was a U.S., UK, Swedish effort to make this sexual assault charge against Julian Assange be the defining feature of the case, as well as to allow him to be extradited to Sweden and so on and so forth. But, as outsiders, running in this political system, I mean, when you see things like this, how does it make you feel, running either in the positive of this is why I'm running, or in the more practical analytical of like, this is what I have to do in order to run?
Yeah, I'll go first just as a libertarian. I mean, we know that the system is stacked against us. We know through elections, we know through everything from like the way I have to file here. It's all different. It's all stacked to keep us out. So when I hear about these FOIA requests, I mean, who doesn't know that FOIA is a joke at this point? I mean, from whether it's local or even all the way up to federal, I mean, it's, if the government is going to exist, if they are going to put these gates up, like Snowden referenced, the gates that they're just going to keep putting up, it should be transparent. We were told that there was going to be a way that we could access the things that they didn't want to just put public. So it's just, like he said, it's not surprising. And it's why we have to get as many people that are outside the major parties into positions where we can try to poke holes and try to undo just some of this blatant abuse of the system.
Yeah, but I would say though, I mean, amongst us, we know this stuff, but I think if you talk to people that don't really pay attention to politics, they don't know. Right. And it's a shock. I mean, maybe they know about Snowden, but that was so long ago. I mean, so I think that's a problem too. There's just people don't understand that. So,
well, I have a question for the other candidates. Do any of your opponents even say the words Julian Assange? I can't say for sure that Tammy Baldwin and Eric Hovde can pronounce his name. Seriously. I wonder if, and that, to me, that shows that it's both of the major parties that are responsible for this together, working together, whether I think intentionally, whether you think it's intentional or not, the fact is that they work together to maintain the current regime. And by not mentioning his name, that's one of the ways they keep his name in this case out of people's minds, and it makes it so difficult for the rest of us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that goes hand in hand with not mentioning our names too, So if they ignore us, we don't exist. And I don't ever recall Norcross ever talking about Assange at all. But he is part of the party that sort of led the way to silencing him. So,
yeah, and yeah, Ben, what do you?
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, if I could just jump in real quick, because this kind of ties into something we're dealing with here in New Jersey. We have something called the Open Public Records Act, or OPRA, and this was a tool that is essentially like the Federal Freedom of Information Act, but where we had access to any public records with obviously plenty of caveats to that, but this was a tool that we were able to use often to get the information that we wanted. And now, I believe just about a week ago, they have now put that on the chopping block, and they're signing, I think it's going to the governor's desk to sign an amendment to the Open Public Records Act and essentially gut what it's capable of doing. And this is after I submitted a request for the Open Public Records to Rutgers University to disclose their contracts with Tel Aviv University in Israel. And they have delayed that until June 3rd, and the primaries are June 4th. So it really makes you question, well, why have they essentially unlawfully delayed revealing these public records? Well, it looks like it kind of lines up with the primaries.
No doubt. And unfortunately, though, what do? You have to sue. I mean, like Stefani has done, and that costs
Right.
money and years. And
Mhm.
so I think this stuff is just so entrenched. I think, it feels like we're up against this impossible task, but I think it's just going to take all of us, everyone that wants to change this. It's a huge battle. But,
And I'd argue too that's something that when Ben was speaking during his introduction, he identified correctly how capitalism has gone awry and taken control of our government. And whether you're a libertarian that supports capitalism as an idea or a green that probably doesn't, forgive me for overgeneralizing, we certainly share the common recognition of the unholy alliance of money and politics. And so, I'm trying to work with people. I'm working with people all across Wisconsin of various political persuasions, because there's the things that we have in common are more important than our differences, at least right now, because we don't have a seat at the table. So if we all work on this issue and the issues that bind us together as people that are outside the system and just trying to get in and be heard, then I think we can be successful. I hope we can be successful. I'm not saying
yes, definitely. Thank you, Phil. I love it. I know we have to, because there are so many things we agree on. And if we get it down, I think even it would be interesting at some point to have those conversations about capitalism and healthcare and all of that, that maybe, these third parties can work things out better than the two major parties. But
You're going to say something, Olivia?
Yes, yeah, thanks. I was just reminded as Ben and Phil were talking, this is actually one of those issues. I get the response from some of my state and federal senators that like, oh, well, there isn't anything we can do. Like that's, the nations are fighting over what to do with this guy. But this bleeds all the way down to everyday citizens. I work with the racial profiling board here in my county, and they are helping people all the time that are having issues with law enforcement, and they've got open cases. And I know people personally that are just trying to get the records of whatever's going on, and they're not able to get it. They're being bounced around to what department, the statute of limitations, all that stuff. So, this is just more of the same. And it's one of those issues that's happening on a global scale that absolutely affects people down at the local level. And it's just, like you were saying, Kelly, it's just something we have to advocate for. We have to fight for, because it truly is not one of those issues that they're never going to decide on. It's one of those issues that affects all of us. In the world of social media, none of us is safe. None of us is safe if they take our transparency and they continue to take our free speech.
Right.
Yeah, and what's happening to Julian, again, it just highlights that we don't really have free speech or free press in this country. But I think more people are starting to notice. Just all the abuses are getting so egregious that I feel like more people are becoming aware. So, I think all the stuff you all were saying is true about the timing for the elections and everything, and Kelly talking about how the government is, getting around the FOIA requests and things like that. So they are getting better at those things, and the censorship and attacks on the free press are getting worse too. But I feel like it's getting to a point where it's hard to ignore, and more people are talking.
Right. And we've also noticed we've had a lot of younger candidates. And I think that, young people are seeing more of what's happening thanks to TikTok, partly. But, and they're not going to just fall in line, I don't think. I think that's changed. That is a big change. I think that they're going to have a hard time getting the younger crowd. Gen Z is not having it from what I see. So whoever wants to jump in, if not, I've got a great, guess what, Meltzer clip about the Fourth Estate. Have we played that one yet?
I don't know if we have or not.
Should I? Anyone? Or this is for you guys. So if anyone, go right ahead, or I can play this. Okay, I'll play this.
The role of the media and of the press is not to entertain us. It is to empower us, right? Today, they don't really entertain us, to distract us, but they're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to focus our attention to empower us to observe and supervise how government is being conducted. And if something doesn't work or there's misconduct, they're supposed to inform the public. So the public can now, through democratic means, take the consequences and basically elect other representatives or whatever, or the judiciary can, based on this information, initiate investigations and so on. So the media has a crucial role in society. That's why they're called the fourth estate. The mainstream media has increasingly kind of dropped this hot potato and turned to just entertain people and make money with people, and advertisements and these types of things. But they're no longer actually empowering the people as they're supposed to do in democracy. So now, because they left this gap, you have a kind of a rogue actor coming in, like WikiLeaks, and saying, okay, hold on, we'll inform you, and we'll establish a platform where whistleblowers, which means employees of governments or of companies that observe misconduct and that report that misconduct internally, but that those companies and the governments, they're not taking care of that, they're not doing anything about it, then they can actually submit this information anonymously to WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks will publish it and thereby empower the public again to have that information and to take the measures that are necessary to correct that. So that's really the role that they have. They're somehow like, I always say, whistleblowers, which are the people that supply WikiLeaks with information. They're the alarm system of a democratic society.
Well, far be it for me to disagree with Nils, but I'm going to.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Okay.
So hopefully I get this right and don't sound silly. He said that the media is supposed to empower us. I don't think that that's the media's job, whether it's private media, corporations or whatever, or even public media. I think that idea is old and maybe never was accurate. We don't know how much misinformation we were being fed back when there was only 3 or 4 networks. We assumed that it was accurate and that good journalism was going on, but I don't know. But I think I point to something that Olivia mentioned, and that is when she was talking about where people are getting their news, it's incumbent on us as citizens who are taxed and supposedly represented, et cetera, to be discerning about the news that we search out and that we receive and that we believe based on what we understand to be true and based on our worldview, and not to sit back and give media the role of informing us, just giving it to them. I think that's an older idea. I think it's dangerous. And I think right now, the environment that we're in is the fruit of that. We have to be discerning and go out there and survey the different news sources and see where they agree, see where they disagree, make sure that articles are citing sources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's all. No, I don't think that works, because I think if people sit back and expect to be informed by any channel on the television at all, that they're subject to and have been victims of, and Americans certainly been victims of it for 50, 60 years, being what's manufactured, our consent is being manufactured, and has been. And when did Noam write that book? It was like the 1970s, right? It's a long time ago. It's been going on a long time. We can't sit back and just expect them to inform us.
Olivia, you look like you want to jump in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Phil. I kind of thought I would, but yeah, no, I think the idea that they're here to empower and inspire, like, no, that is not, those days are long gone. It really is. They are here to just give us the facts and not give us the spin. And that's what we have with WikiLeaks and some of these other international third-party, truly independent sources. But we're big on, our party is really big on yourself taking responsibility, and you have to. One of the first things I was taught as a journalism major, and something I do with my kids, is for current events, you find a story, any story, and find it in another news source, and find it in another news source, and then go find an influencer or a TikTok video, and that helps. I'm training my kids at a young age to identify the spin. And unfortunately, that is part of being an American citizen at this point, is identifying the spin in the media. So yeah, I would totally agree with you just on that part about that's not, the media should just be giving us, the bread and butter, and we're going to go figure out what we're going to make out of it. Right. Like they should truly just, and that's why when it comes to candidates, my rule has a long time been like, you have to go to the source. You have to go to that candidate's platform, that candidate's, social media. You have to hear what they are saying from their mouth, because too much of it can be clipped and spin and all that stuff. So yeah.
All right. Robin and Ben, your thoughts on all that? And I know, Robin, what you led off with. I mean, you talking about you were working on this, 3 decades ago.
Yeah. Because I was teaching courses about media control. That wasn't the main thing I would teach about, but I had courses where the focus was on how the news was reported, who owned the media, and so forth. And even back, I remember teaching this back in the 1990s, and having my students look up the ownership of different newspapers and TV news and so forth, and see how much of what they're actually saying in the news reflects the will and the values and the wishes of its ownership. And so I was for maybe even before that, really acutely aware of media control. Actually, if you go back even to the beginning of the 20th century, you can find articles in like the New York Times and so forth that are very anti-labor and pro-war, and again reflect the ownership of the New York Times. The New York Times has always been anti-labor and pro-war. And I actually have an old copy from 1917 of the New York Times that I found in the eaves of my house. They used it for insulation in the house in the old days. And it was a perfectly intact copy of the New York Times. And right there was something bashing a strike of, I forget which, steel workers or something like that at the time. And it was just classic anti-labor, pro-war articles all over the New York Times back in 1917. This is what has happened to Julian Assange is more. It's like it's a reflection of how much more powerful the corporations are in the political system and so forth, and how much more control. I mean, they've always kind of controlled the media and the information we get, but silencing Julian Assange and other whistleblowers means that they have even more control, and we're seeing this, and it's reflected in like the kinds of nonsense we have to deal with liberals who should know better. That people who they're all about identity politics, and they're anti-racist and so forth, but they still buy the nonsense that's being conveyed to them through MSNBC or CNN or again the New York Times, and they have not ever learned to question what are they really trying to get us to do with this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the New York Times, the New York Times represents the left wing of Wall Street, as they say, right? I mean, so, and
Oh my God.
yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it. And Ben, any thoughts on this? And then we're going to have to start wrapping up.
Absolutely. A few thoughts, actually. For one, I think I would want to speak to this generational idea that had been mentioned, that very much so my generation in particular is very aware of this type of media spin that's been going on. I would even argue that there's a bit of a developing class consciousness across the generation, and many class consciousness evolutions have taken historically a generation or two to really take off. And I remember, I don't remember if I had posed this question to my friends or if they had posed it to me, or if we were just sort of chatting about it, but the question was asked, do we live in a post-truth world? And I couldn't really get a good answer to that question, because certainly there's a innate reality, but at the same time, you can find any article that says one fact is true in one way, and then find an article that says the opposite is true. For virtually anything. I did an experiment myself where I kind of did that, and it was shocking at how you could just get any information. So growing up in the information age, for me, has shown me really a lot of nonsense, like Robin mentioned. So
I want to say one other thing about the media, though, and maybe not for Gen Z, but I think other generations. I'll talk to people and they'll say, "Well, I don't watch that. I don't watch CNN," but it's everywhere. It's pervasive. You're in the airport. You're at the dentist office. I mean, I've even gone and asked for it to be turned off in the lobby of the dentist office, but you just can't get away from it. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
but I will say this. The numbers that came out last week, ratings wise, for the 3 major cable networks are worse and worse and worse. And CNN actually had its worst ratings in 30 years. We had more viewers for the live stream we did in front of the courthouse last week. We had up to 150,000 viewers at one point on Twitter. CNN was getting 88,000 viewers for their prime time. I mean,
wow.
So it shows you, right? It shows you the power of what we're doing. And we can get into a whole other conversation on that, right? About why this terrifies them, why this technology, coupled then with the ability to access information, which is what Julian and WikiLeaks were doing in 2006 when they started this, right? I mean, it terrifies them. But unfortunately, we're at the hour mark, and we need to start to wrap up.
Yes, and speaking of the technology, you saw my camera go out?
Yes, that's happened before. Yeah.
No, not just the camera.
Oh, okay. Well,
new one this time.
The good thing is the StreamYard technology is so good that if you leave, we're still all here.
Right.
So as long as we're okay, Kelly,
good. Yeah.
We can.
I don't know what's going on. Like I said, I've got fiber, and I have no idea. I'm hardwired. I don't know. It's odd. So I'll not speculate further on that. Okay, so we'll go out with, let's see, this is Jesse Jett, and it's kind of.
Well, let's go around real quick, give everyone a chance to say, once again, who they are, how they can be supported. And real quick, also too, since we're talking about information, and Daniel, this includes you as well. What is, just in a sentence or two, what is the best thing you're finding to engage people in terms of how do you get word out about your campaign? What's been the best practice for you? So those three things.
Start with Olivia, and you can get something that's great. I'll make a clip of if you like. So go ahead.
Okay. Olivia Hayes. I'm running for Senate in District 30 in Kansas. So you can find me on social media. The Mama Marketer is my handle on everything. My campaign website is oliviahayes.com. That's HAYSE. And I would say early on, before my campaign, I was told that, because my background is digital marketing. So I believe in this. I know this is the best thing for my buck. I know how to do all the things on the interwebs, right? But I was given advice at the very beginning that said that nothing is going to replace like one-to-one face-to-face contact with voters. And that's the hard part, right? But I have found it to be true. So, I mean, anybody, any like I've gone to HOAs, which is funny as a libertarian. So I've gone to HOAs, zoning meetings, anybody that even just wants to have a small gathering in their house, coffee shops. I mean, I'm not saying no to any invitation right now, especially if you're in my district. And soon we're going to be getting into like fairs and parades and festivals and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm sticking true to that advice. It's turning out to be true that one-on-one contacts. I've learned a lot in those first few kind of smaller meetings that I've gone to and hanging around and talking with potential voters one-on-one. Like you really do quickly hear what's important to them, and you see trends very quickly. So I would say that would be the best way to reach people. And was there anything else I didn't answer? I can't remember. I feel like that was the punch list.
No, that was terrific.
Okay, Phil.
Again, Phil Anderson, U.S. Senate, Wisconsin, AndersonForUSSenate.com. My Twitter handle is the number 4, PHILWI, for Phil, Wisconsin. The most effective thing this cycle has been for me the last couple of months is Twitter, or X. I don't want to call it X yet. I'm still calling it Twitter. And just harassing my opponents. And the thing is, especially on X, you see politicians putting things out there and some of their followers looking at them, but a lot of their opponents. So you can pick up people that are dissatisfied with whoever's putting out the tweet, but maybe not happy with their own candidate. And if you've been consistent, like I have for 10 plus years in a public place in Wisconsin, that people remember your name and they understand that you've been consistent, and you can pick up a lot of followers that way, which I've done pretty successfully.
Great.
Cool. Robin?
Okay. Again, I'm Robin Brownfield, running for Congress as a Green in Congressional District 1 in New Jersey. I can be found at on Instagram, on X or Twitter, on Facebook, and soon to be some other places too. On Instagram, it's Robin Brownfield for Congress NJ. If you just look up my name, you will find me all over. You'll find me all over the internet, because I'm also a well-known artist in my area, and also, I've had thousands of students in this area too. So, but Robin Brownfield for Congress, New Jersey, NJ, on Instagram is probably the best place to start.
Cool. Okay, Ben?
Yeah, so you can find me, my social media is virtually all at Ben Taylor NJ, and my website is benforcongressnj.com, and that's 4 spelled out, FOR, not the number 4 in this case. And like I said, I'm running in Congressional District 9 of New Jersey. And yeah, the best way to talk to voters and talk to the public, it has been, for me at least, certainly getting out and talking to people face to face, as Olivia mentioned, super important. That's crucial to a democracy always. Social media, of course, like Phil mentioned too, also a very helpful tool, in podcasts like Candidates for Assange right here has been very great for me to get my name out. And one last thing I'll just say is more and more people are starting to, I think, unite their struggles. And I think that the more that we do that, the better we'll be able to reach more people.
Absolutely. And Daniel, do you want to say something about any upcoming things you've got going on?
No, again, I'm not running for anything, but I did want to say thank you to all the candidates for being willing to talk about this. And I agree with Phil that I think it is pretty safe to say that most people running have not mentioned or even said Julian's name, but I do think that is changing. I mean, Donald Trump just said his name in an interview with Tim Pool. So we can use that to keep the conversation going. And I think just that I agree with you all that face-to-face, one-on-one is the most important. And also that Twitter is second if you can't be out there doing it yourself. But yeah, please do check out DC Action for Assange. They have a Twitter, or you can reach me on Twitter to get involved. But I think the DC actions are really the most important right now.
Definitely. Thank you guys so much. This has been wonderful. I'm just glad there are more candidates that keep popping up. We'll just keep hoping there are more. So, all right. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Ken.
If you thought you saw your freedom, it was truly a mirage. Freedom's locked a cell away from Julian Assange. Our First Amendment rights are by his side behind bars, and the next voices silenced will be ours. Rest assured, democracy is rotting in the dark. Rest assured, we vilified dissenters, pushed out black renters, and tore down their housing just to build a little urban park. God, I tell you, old America really knows how to leave its mark. Blaze a trail, leave 100 scars. Rip your free speech out your throat, demonize the man who told you it was so, and leave him freezing in a cell in Belmarsh. Perpetually awaiting extradition. Thrown to the wolves of claustrophobia and malnutrition. And all that we can hope is that we catch Uncle Joe in a fleeting lucid moment of his flickering senile fascist mission. That maybe we could trick him into thinking Julian is just some sweet blonde middle school Christian, and she got mixed up with a few bad apples, slapped with some charges, and thrown into prison. Joe would set him free without a moment's hesitation under one condition: that he can sniff her hair before she goes back to school and he goes back to business. But if Joe's just had his shots, then we haven't got a chance of getting past his black and white vision. Getting past his gut reaction to appease all of his donors' sick requests and shape policy and law around corporate mandated decisions. So really, all along, I think Julian was one man standing in a tempest with the fearlessness of true conviction. And if his is the only conviction we see after he shed a light on this country's most poisonous schemes all come to fruition, and we all collectively stare at the ground because we felt like our hands were too tied beyond signing petitions, while he's tortured to death for attempting to warn and enlighten admittedly not quite the brightest of citizens, and half of this country just won't take the time to uncover the truth, or they just don't mind, so they're quick to dismiss it and say it's a difficult position. Then we're back to the comfort of centrist delusion. We're right back to sleep for those ignorant sheep who resisted themselves into one protracted contusion, twisting themselves into knots to correct all your stimulus check-based confusion, wrapping their necks around their backs as they justify overflow migrant detention or fracking pollution. Then Kamala laughs, and the camera pans down to her shoes. And that footage is 90% of your 6 o'clock news. Except for a feel-good story about a man who at 95 years young just made Employee of the Month at Whole Foods. And the $50 gift card means this month he'll afford his prescriptions and meals, and he won't have to choose. This is the machine that a man named Julian Assange threw his body on the gears of for you. So to cry out for his freedom is the least that we can do. Now best believe the feds will serve to muddy up the truth, but rest assured the temperature in Belmarsh is an icy 22, and Julian is shivering in a solitary room without a view. Rest assured Obama loves a whistleblower just about as much as he loves weddings where he doesn't get to detonate the groom. Rest assured Obama bought the plot where all our First Amendment rights are gonna rot and demanded that they carve his smiling likeness on the tomb. So that when you come to pay respects to your free speech rights and a somber feeling hits you and you look up to the sky, the answer will be staring you right in the eyes to the questions of why and of who. So if you thought you saw your freedom, then they wanted you to. Human rights are mutable, and Julian is proof. Our First Amendment rights are stuck in solitary too. And the next voice silent might be you.